all they solely treat is cancer. And they looked at my profile, they looked at my scans and what had happened, and then they instantly referred me to the oncologist that I have now. And my first meeting with him, I sat down and I said to him what I'd been previously told, and he looked at me and he said, look, there's not going to be any doom and gloom in this situation. We're not going to talk about numbers. We're not going to talk about years. We're going to talk about curative intent. And I remember when he said that, my mum and I just kind of like broke down and blubbed, and I was like, oh my God, that's, I can't believe it, because the last kind of, I think it was about 3 weeks, I'd gone from kind of finding out this 2-year prognosis to him actually turning around and saying to me, no, there is something that we can do. It was just this relief that, oh my God, okay, potentially there is the chance that actually I am going to see past my 27th birthday.
Hello, and welcome to Pursuing Health. I'm Dr. Julie Fouché, family physician and former CrossFit Games athlete. Here, I bring you information and inspiration to help bridge the gap between fitness and medicine and support your journey toward your healthiest self. This episode is one of a series of Pursuing Health stories, where I feature the inspiring stories of regular, everyday people who've used lifestyle to overcome some incredible health challenges. And this week's episode was no exception. I shared a conversation with Fran Whitfield, who's a London-based personal trainer, and at the age of 25 learned she had breast cancer that had metastasized to her brain and her liver. And she was initially given a prognosis of just 2 years to live. Now, I cannot imagine what it feels like to be facing such a challenge, but I met Fran a couple of weeks ago at the CrossFit Games and was blown away by her story and her mental and physical resilience. She really exemplifies what it means to be her own advocate and also use her experience to advocate for so many others. As we were having this conversation, there were so many times that Fran would offer an insight or a lesson that I knew I needed to hear personally or could directly apply to my own life. So I hope you enjoy hearing her story as much as I did, and you learn some things that you can take home for yourself. Before we dive into the episode, I do want to make it clear that this podcast is for general information only and does not provide medical advice. I recommend that you seek assistance from your personal physician for any health conditions or concerns. So with that, let's get started with the episode. All right. Well, welcome to Pursuing Health. I am very excited to be here with Fran Whitfield, who I recently met for the first time at the 2021 CrossFit Games. And you have such an incredible story. I was practically in tears the first time meeting you and hearing your story. And so I'm really excited for you to join me here on the podcast and just share it with our audience. So thank you so much for joining us all the way from the UK.
Yeah, all the way from good old London, rainy London.
Well, let's just start off with your background. So I know that you are a trainer over in the UK and you've always been very athletic, but tell us just about your background and how training has been important to you.
Yeah, so I have been a personal trainer now for, I think, 5 years, and I'm coming up for my 6th year now. I got into it. Originally, I went to university and I studied psychology. And then when I was at university, I got very much into weightlifting and training through that. And then I had a complete 360 career change. I kind of my desire was to do clinical psychology, and then I completely changed it. And then I went into personal training.
There's a lot of overlap though, probably.
Yeah. Like it, because I started training like friends of mine, and then I then saw like the amazing mental health side effects that it has, in like growing their confidence and they were just coming along to the gym and started training with me. And it was kind of at that time where females didn't really weightlift. It was kind of a bit like, oh, should I weightlift? I don't want to get bulky and all of that kind of stuff, and nervous to enter the weight room and everything. And then when they started to see me going in there, they were like, oh, can I join a session with you? And then I thrived off of it. I loved taking them through sessions and them training with me, and then seeing the benefits that it was having from them and their confidence and watching them grow. And I was like, I really love this. And so, I did a complete 360 and then retrained as a personal trainer. And then I've been doing that now in London, for about 5-6 years. Into like with my own fitness, I've dabbled in lots of different things: weightlifting, endurance training. Like I was training for Ironman, done duathlons, triathlons, kind of experimented with those. And I think at the beginning when I got into fitness, it was very much for kind of aesthetics and that sort of thing. And then it then became very much a performance drive. Quite quickly, actually, when I've been sort of more like performance based, I would say, for the last kind of 4 years, training for different events and races and CrossFit now as well. That's my kind of like my drive now. I only really do CrossFit at the moment. Also because of obviously everything else that's been going on that we'll get into, but that's my kind of like soul training at the moment. But yeah, I did it for performance, and I do it for my own mental health as well. I was very insecure growing up as a child. I had body dysmorphia. I had an eating disorder as well when I was younger, and it was through weightlifting and it was through training that actually got me out of that. And I grew my confidence and got my weight back on track. And so pretty much like exercise and training saved me in my mental health as I was like growing up into a young adult.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think, I hear that from many women, that just this shift in mindset about what training is, from burn. And I know I experienced it personally, from something that you do to burn calories and to look a certain way, to moving into maybe more weightlifting or doing it for performance, where you're trying to always get better and learn new skills and increase the weight you can lift or the times that you can do workouts in. And suddenly it just completely changes the way that you think about your body and your relationship with your body. So that's amazing that you had that experience too.
Yeah, hugely. And it really benefits as well, because obviously like when your drive shifts from being kind of the whole like weight loss and, trying to be as like slim as you can, which is what I used to be. And then when you then actually try and be as strong as you can, to do that, you need to eat a lot. And so then that really benefited me, because I was like, well, I really want to get strong, but the only way that I'm going to get strong is if I eat. And then that kind of like forced me then to get my eating back on track, to stop skipping all the meals that I was. And it came hand in hand, really.
That's incredible. So, training became such a big part of your life. You're training other people. You're focused on your own performance. You're a very young, healthy, active 22, 23-year-old. And then one day you noticed that something wasn't quite right with your body. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah. So it was January 2019. It was when it all first kind of started to kick off. So it was one evening that I was just in my flat. I just adopted my cat. This is such a random story, but I just adopted my cat. He was in bed with me and he was padding incessantly on my chest. And I kept pushing him off, and I was like, get off, Sazzy, get off. And I was like, God, this cat's really bizarre. Like, why does he keep like padding away on my boobs? And then as I brushed him off, I then felt something as I brushed him, and I was like, oh, that's really strange. I felt something on me. And then I'd never really checked before, because is it like a 23, 24-year-old? You're like, no, I don't, like, it's not really anything that's like prominent in your mind to check at that time. But I felt a very significant lump in my right breast, and I was like, okay, this is unusual. Had a little bit of a panic. So the following day, I then called up the GP, booked in to see them. And then so I went down straight away, saw my doctor, and she felt it and she confirmed that there was a lump there. So she referred me for a scan at the hospital to obviously check what was going on. So I went down for the scan the following week. But when I went in, they asked you all the routine questions. What do you do for a job? Obviously, I said personal trainer. Are you fit and healthy? Yes. I was at the time I was training for Ironman, so I was like, yes, I am probably the fittest I've ever been in my life. And I kind of ticked all the boxes of someone that was, fit, healthy. Obviously, I was young, vegetarian. Do you smoke? No. Do you drink? No. And then she then just said to me, you don't need the scan. It's a hormonal lump. You're normal. You're fine. You're young. You're fit. You're healthy. Good luck with Ironman. And then that was it. And then I kind of got sent back out the door. The appointment was super quick, and I didn't get the scan that I went there for. Obviously, you take kind of their word for it. And so I thought, okay, fine. It's nothing to be a concern of, until last year. And I wasn't aware, like I knew, I'd kind of, in my mind, it was like a niggle, because I knew it was still there. but I hadn't become aware of how big it had actually grown. It was growing internally, so it wasn't growing, you know, out, pushing out of my skin. I had quite large breasts, and obviously as a young female as well, your tissue is denser. It's very difficult to feel that it was getting larger. So it wasn't until last year, and it was in May, that I'd actually had an accident. It was during lockdown, and I'd had an accident in my garden doing a deadlift, and I'd slipped a disc in my back, and it paralyzed my left leg. So I went into hospital, had emergency spinal surgery, and I was in rehab for that. And one day I just started to get really severe stabbing pains, exactly where the lump was. And I kind of just sort of, my mind was quite focused on the fact that I was trying to learn to walk again.
Yeah, you were a little preoccupied.
Kind of yeah. And I was like, oh, come on, like, you know, don't need any more pain in my life right now. I'm trying to get over this, obviously, like back pain. But it just wouldn't go away. I had the stabbing pain for about a week, and then I was just kind of like, okay, this isn't going away. Like, wasn't sure whether it was kind of a side effect of potentially like the drugs that I was on for my back. But then when I was in the shower, I noticed that a dimple had appeared in my right breast. This was like early July now. It was about 6 weeks after my back surgery. So the dimple had appeared in my right breast where I knew the lump was. I knew that wasn't a good sign. I'd previously kind of researched into signs of breast cancer when I originally found the lump. And I knew that was a sign. But in my mind, I'd kind of thought, well, it's painful. And everyone says if it's a painful lump, then you'll be okay. But I was like, okay. Following morning, called up the doctor again. And I was like, right. You know, they knew obviously from my record that I'd been there previously, a couple of years before. And then, so I said to her, well, I really feel like I need to get this checked out. A dimple has appeared. And because of COVID, because of the pandemic, there was going to be quite a large delay on getting seen to. But I couldn't handle that. I knew in my body that there was just something not right with this situation. So I paid for a rapid diagnostic test, got seen straight away by a consultant who, when I went into the room with him, I remember clear as day, I went in and he examined me, physically examined me, and then asked me to come and sit back down. I remember sitting back down with him and just thinking, oh, I really feel like I need to say like, sorry for wasting his time. You know, there's a pandemic. Like, I know that I've been told this is normal. This is a hormonal lump. So I sat down and I just said, I'm really sorry if I've wasted your time. And he just looked at me straight in the eye and he said, I need you to go next door and I need you to have an ultrasound and a biopsy. I was like, okay, thinking it maybe this is just routine. And then, so they took me off to the room next door. I had the biopsy, it came back through. And then he then said to me, I'm going to be very straight with you. I'm very concerned about what I can feel. And also the radiographer next door, who was just on your ultrasound, has emailed me through just now to say she is also very concerned. We'll get the results in 3 days' time. You need to come back with a chaperone. So at that point, I was kind of, everyone says like, oh, you know, try and keep a positive mind, but just the way that he looked at me and the way that he said it, I was like, this isn't going to be okay. And sure enough, 3 days later, I went back in, they diagnosed me with breast cancer. And obviously at that time, you're kind of like, you don't really know how to feel because I was 25 and I was kind of like, well, I'm the fittest, apart from obviously my back. I am probably the fittest and strongest I've ever been. And I tick all the boxes of someone that typically shouldn't get cancer, you know, non-smoker, non-drinker really, and vegetarian, very active lifestyle, zero family history of it. But also in the back of my mind, knowing that if I had been taken seriously previously when I originally went there, then it would have also been cancer then too. Because I did say to him that I found this before. If they had scanned me, would it have still been cancer? And he said, the size of the tumor, this has been there for a very long time. Wow. So I knew in him saying that, you know, but when I initially got the result, it was quite positive in that time. So when I spoke to him and we got the result and we got the genetic makeup of the tumor. It was non-aggressive. It was slow growing, which was quite rare for someone of my age. Usually it's quite aggressive. And he said that it's easily treatable and it's curable. But just to be safe, we're going to do a full body scan just to make sure. And then in those 2 weeks preceding that, I had 7 different scans because each one kept flagging up another issue after another issue that they then sort of tried to like dive in a little bit deeper until 2 weeks from the day that I was diagnosed. I was getting wheeled in to have brain surgery because what they had actually discovered was that in that time that I was misdiagnosed, it had metastasized and I had a tumor in my skull. And I also had a tumor in my liver. So I had brain surgery 2 weeks after. Didn't really have time to kind of think about it or time to breathe. It was literally like every day I was pretty much going in for a different scan until they then obviously found this brain one and then said to me, you have a choice. We do surgery or we try and treat it non-surgically. However, they did then say to me that my prognosis would be most likely 2 years. So I was like, well, that leaves me to 27. And what on earth do you do by the time you're 27? And, you know, I've got so many ambitions, so many aims. So I was like, I'll sign on the dotted line. Let's go. Let's do surgery.
Yeah.
Straight in. And it went really well. Like the surgery went really well. They removed about 80% of it, they said. But they couldn't remove all of it because it was tangled up in muscles and nerves. So if they did try and do what they wanted to do, which essentially was kind of scrape it all out, I would have been left with permanent nerve and muscle damage, which to be fair, I kind of do already. I have really weird spots in my head where like if I touch it, I feel it in different places in my face. It's very bizarre. And if I like scratch my temple, it feels like someone's tickling my eye. It's quite funky. But yeah, it's quite odd. But the surgery was very successful. It did go well. They did remove a large majority of it, but obviously I would need subsequent treatment to follow up. So that was in August last year. And then in September, the day after my birthday, I started chemotherapy. So I did chemo for 6 months, by which point I was actually at a different hospital because I didn't like the fact that I was given this prognosis of 2 years and I wanted to fight. And it was kind of, and my old oncologist had said to me, if the brain tumor comes back as secondary to your breast, then we're looking at 2 years. And when the results came back from the lab after my surgery and it confirmed 2 years, I was like, okay, I'm out. I'm not having 2 years. Like I want to fight this and I need someone to back me and fight me as well. And very thankfully and gratefully, I got referred to a specialist cancer hospital in London, and my oncologist there, he is incredible and I literally owe him everything. And he now is trying to treat me with curative intent. So he's had an amazing career. I'm very lucky that I've got him. But we're kind of plowing everything at my treatment at the moment. So yeah, I had 6 months of pretty aggressive chemotherapy. That took me until March this year. Then I had Cyberknife Radiotherapy to my skull, just as kind of, they call it like an insurance technique, I suppose, to make sure it doesn't come back. So I had lots of x-rays going into my skull. It's completely like painless. It's a very amazing machine that they've got. Like modern technology these days and modern medicine is incredible. But I had that in April. And then I'm now on a targeted therapy drug, which is a relatively new drug. But it's called abemaciclib, and it basically stops 2 proteins in my body from working that cause the cancer to grow. So we're testing that at the moment. So I haven't had my breast surgery yet because they're using the tumor. They're watching it to see whether or not it's shrinking with the drug that I'm on. So far, so good. I do have my scan tomorrow, my next one tomorrow, to see whether or not it's still doing its job. And then we'll go from there and then see. But at the moment, I'm still very much in treatment. Yeah, I'm on the targeted therapy. I'm also on hormonal therapy to block all of my hormones. So as a 26-year-old female, I am in the menopause. I have all the hot flushes and the night sweats and everything that comes with the menopause. And so me and my mum are very much on the same page at the moment.
Yeah.
And have all of the same things. But yeah, in a kind of nutshell, try to sort of concise that as much as I could. That has been my last 12 months. So when everyone's been talking about the pandemic, I'm like, my mind's kind of focused on something else at the moment. Like, as awful as COVID is as well, it did not make treatment easy, because I had to go through everything on my own. I wasn't allowed like visitors or anything like that. But yeah, 2020 was a bit of a wild one.
Wow. There is a lot there. I have so many questions and things I want to dig in on, but I think the thing that comes through the most strongly for me is just your mental attitude and your resilience through all of it. And I imagine that, there are still a lot of up and down moments, but just as you started to explain, can you share what it felt like in that moment to find out that you did have breast cancer, or even when you found out it had metastasized, knowing that maybe it could have been caught a year and a half earlier, and what kind of emotions and how you were able to process those?
Yeah, so I think inevitably, obviously, anger was the first emotion that you feel in that moment, and hurt. I trusted the person that said to me that I was normal. And I remember her clear as day saying to me, "You're normal, you're fine." And so I went all that time thinking that I was just normal, and that I just had this, hormonal lump, and that was that. So I was incredibly angry at that moment, especially when they then discovered that it had metastasized and I was given a prognosis of 2 years. Essentially, that person had shortened my life. But I kind of very quickly came out of that mindset. A lot of people say to me, like, "Oh, I bet, you wish you could be in a room with that woman and give her hell." And actually, no, I don't, because that isn't going to help my situation. I am in this situation now. This has happened to me. I have notified the hospital, and she has been notified. But I notified them in the premise that they learn from this. I don't want anyone losing their job. I don't want anyone, having to go through any kind of like hardship from it. What I do want them to do is learn from this mistake, so that the next time a 24-year-old goes in there and says, "I've discovered a lump," but they might be of complete 100% health, with everything else, they're not ignored and they're not disregarded. So kind of the fuel and the anger that I had towards the situation very much turned into a fight to change the situation in the best way that I can. Like, I can't change my situation now. So it's not helpful. I kind of adopted this mindset of, it's not helpful to me to sit there and to be angry towards that person and that situation, because it isn't going to change it. But I can use that to fuel what I can change, which is trying to change the policy that they have at the moment, which is, unfortunately, if you go in there as a young person with a lump, it's not policy to be scanned. It's actually only policy to be scanned if you are over the age of 45. So I'm very much trying to strive for that, to have that change, so that any young person goes in there and has noticed a slight difference in their body, they are completely taken seriously and they are checked to an inch of their life. But also I'm using it as a kind of fuel to change the mindset that you unfortunately aren't safe from cancer. It doesn't discriminate. The statistic knows now 1 in 2 in the UK. So I'm very much open about my situation and what happened to me and everything, so that people do pick up on any slight changes to their body. And then they fight for the scan and they resist against the scan. If I could go back there now, I would obviously not leave the room until I had that scan. But yeah, instead of kind of using that fuel in sort of a detrimental way, which I think would be as if I was to sit there and be upset about it. And, you know, and of course there are times where I am. It's very natural to be upset about it, and to, when you're very much like in depth of treatment and it's exhausting sometimes, and you just kind of think my situation could be so different right now. But I try and just snap out of that, and I think, okay, well, it can't be. Like, I'm in it, so I'm gonna fight it. I'm gonna do what I can in this moment, but I'm also gonna try and sure as hell try and not let this happen to as many other people as I possibly can.
It's amazing, and see your background in psychology coming through very strong there in the way you've been able to apply it in your own life. And I think it's such a beautiful example for all of us in any situation that we're in. There's things that we can control and things that we can't control, but being able to focus on what we can control and having those emotions, which are very normal, and allowing ourselves to feel them and process them, but then focusing on what we can control and using that situation to help other people or to prevent it from happening again. So that's incredible. I also love how you said, hey, if this person's going to give me a prognosis of 2 years, I don't want to be in this environment, right? You were able to lift yourself out of that environment that was maybe going to be limiting, and find a care team who was on the same page and wanted to fight aggressively with you. So can you just talk about that and what difference that made and why you made that decision?
Yeah. So I knew, I remember sitting at home and having the chat with my family and just feeling this overwhelming feeling of rage that someone had sat there to me and had said to me, you've got 2 years, like 3 maybe at best. And I just kind of, and at the time when she said it, obviously like my world was just kind of crashing around and I didn't know how to process that or to what to think. But when I came home and then I reheard it and it was just playing over and over in my head, and then followed up by when I had the surgery, and then I came out of that surgery and they gave me the results to say, yes, it is a metastasis of the breast cancer. And all I kept thinking was her saying, if this comes back as a metastasis, you've got 2 to 3 years. But I knew myself and I knew how strong I could be. And I was like, well, if I can be this strong and I want to plow everything I possibly can into this treatment, I don't want someone putting me on a palliative treatment. I want to, have someone that's actually going to turn around and say to me, no, these are your options. I'm going to explore what those options are. And I think that's a really key thing as well, is that a lot of people don't realize that you can get a second opinion. And it wasn't me just searching for what I wanted to hear. It wasn't me trying to kind of find out who was going to give me like the happy answer, because in the situation, there is no happy answer. At the end of the day, I'm still going to have to go through all of this treatment. And I knew that. But I wanted to find if there was an opinion of someone that would actually turn around and say to me, like, yes, we can fight this. We can try. And it was pretty easy to get that on my first go. I went to this hospital. It's called the Royal Marsden in London, and all they solely treat is cancer. And they looked at my profile, they looked at my scans and what had happened, and then they instantly referred me to the oncologist that I have now. And my first meeting with him, I sat down and I said to him what I'd been previously told, and he looked at me and he said, look, there's not going to be any doom and gloom in this situation. We're not going to talk about numbers. We're not going to talk about years. We're going to talk about curative intent. And I remember when he said that, my mum and I just kind of like broke down and blubbed. And it was like, oh my God, that's, I can't believe it, because the last kind of, I think it was about 3 weeks, I'd gone from kind of finding out this 2-year prognosis to him actually turning around and saying to me, no, there is something that we can do. It was just this relief that, oh my God, okay, potentially there is the chance that actually I am going to see past my 27th birthday. And now we're rolling in it. And it was very quick. He got me straight into treatment, and he sort of like has plowed everything that, possibly can be done. We've had very high doses of drugs and it has been very aggressive. Thankfully, like I've not, it's not actually been as like horrendous as I thought it was going to be. But it was the news that I was hoping to hear. But as I said, it wasn't kind of a case of me just trying to find the news that I wanted. It was more of is this possible? Can we do it? And I was very grateful to have someone turn around and say to me, yes, like if you're ready, we're ready. And so then we've just been rolling with it since then.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm so glad that you found him and found a different situation. And I know through the whole treatment and recovery process, you also have been, like you said, very aggressive, but because of your fitness and because of your attitude, you have fared extremely well. So can you talk about that? First of all, just your recovery after brain surgery. I think you were walking out of the hospital days before anyone ever thought that you could.
Yeah. So with my brain surgery, I was in like London's largest ICU unit. They stuck me in there after. And the following morning, I was very determined that I didn't want to be in this ICU anymore. It's kind of like cool as it was. I was like I was in a spaceship. It was very funky. But also being in the pandemic, I didn't get to see my family. I was communicating with them, but it's very difficult to communicate them when you have a lot of morphine in your body.
Just brain surgery.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of like you can't really look at a screen and you can't really like focus on anything. So, but I knew in my heart that I really wanted to see my family, and also for them as well. I think it's very, it's not easy to go through it yourself, obviously, but I do think it's a lot harder for the family and the friends that are around you in that situation, because especially in the pandemic, they're not allowed in the hospital to see you. They don't know what's going on. And all I kept thinking was like, I want them to see that I'm okay. Like, I want to be okay. I want them to see that I'm okay. So I had my MRI the following morning just to make sure that there wasn't any bleeding or any additional swelling. That all came back fine. So then I moved up to the ward and I was in there. The physio came around and said, okay, well, at your own pace, when you are ready, we're going to come back and we're going to try and get you out of bed. And I was like, let's do it. And he just looked at me and he was like, well, not quite yet. He was like, we don't have to do it. I was like, no, let's do it. Let's do it. And I'm ready. I'm fine.
I'm ready.
And so then they did. They got me out of bed. We kind of, potted around the ward a little bit, got back in. Then a little bit later on, did it again. And I think they were kind of shocked as well as I was shocked that I was able to do this, but it just really made me appreciate my body and the training that I'd put in before, because they did say the only reason why I was able to get up and do that was the fact that I'd looked after my body so well previously leading up to this surgery. Which is another thing that I really try and push forward now as well, is that when you are training and you are exercising, or if you're not exercising and you're not looking after your body, it's actually, there's more to it than just doing it for, aesthetics, or doing it for, even if you are doing it for performance, that's amazing. But actually there is so much more to it. You don't know what's going to happen to you in your lifetime, whether you're going to, break an arm, break a leg, or have to have part of your skull removed. Like, you just don't know. But if you have looked after your body leading up to that point, your recovery will be so much quicker. And I'm living proof of that. So yeah, it was just after 24 hours, or just under 48 hours, actually. Yeah. I left the hospital. I walked out. I saw my family. I went home. And I was supposed to be in there for a minimum of 7 days, but I left under 48 hours. So that all came from the fact that I was very careful with my body leading up to that point. And I had trained to a very intense level, and, my diet was very good. And, but because of the fact that I was fit and strong, it meant that I was able to leave. I recovered, super fast. I was back exercising within 3 weeks of my surgery, to obviously a less degree than what I went into it in. But I was also very good, grateful that I had a very good neurosurgeon who knew my position. He knew my desire to exercise. When I left the hospital, my first thing to him was, when can I exercise? Not because I'm obsessive, but in my mind, I was like, I know that I'm going to be having chemotherapy coming up. I want to prehab myself. Like, I want to make sure that I'm going into chemo in the best physical strength that I can. And so I just said to him, look, you might think that I'm mental, but when can I start to exercise again? And he was like, no, I completely understand where you're coming from. Like, it's really good that you want to go into chemotherapy strong, very supportive of that. However, please, just for the next couple of weeks, don't do anything. Like, you don't want to increase any intracranial pressure and all of that stuff. I listened to them, didn't do anything. The most I did was kind of potter around and walk, which was actually, to be fair, all that I could do. It was sort of like living on a roundabout a little bit. Like, my head was very spinny for a couple of weeks. But then I got back into it, just kind of like pedaling a little bit on my stationary bike and then building it up from there, so that I knew that when I then went into my next phase of treatment, I could go in a kind of physical state that actually I would be able to get through the next bit.
I love that. And I love how in every step of this process, you really have been such an advocate for yourself. So even in the hospital, knowing that, being home with your family was important to you and pushing for it. And so easily someone, the physical therapist could have come by and you could have said, okay, listen to what they said and said, okay, I'll wait another day or I'll take it slow. But knowing what you wanted and advocating for it, and then having a care team around you that was listening, like your neurosurgeon and your therapist saying, if you can meet these milestones and we're comfortable with you going home, then let's get you home with your family. That's incredible.
Yeah. Because I was very sensible with it. Like, don't get me wrong. I never once kind of didn't listen. I listened to everything that they said, but I worked with them and they worked with me. So I never once gave up. I think that's the big thing. I never once sat there and gave up and just kind of thought, okay, this is my situation, I'm just going to sit here. I kind of, instead, I was like, okay, well, you've told me to rest, fine, but what does that actually mean? What does resting actually mean? Like, can I get out of bed right now? Can I take my own shower? Can I get changed? All those kind of things when I was in the hospital. And if they said to me, yes, you can have a shower, I was like, okay, let's have a shower. Like, let's do it. And when I said to them, can I change out of this gown? I would like to wear my own clothes. Yes, you can wear your own clothes. I was like, okay, I'm going to change. And they said to me, like, would you like us to dress you? I was like, no, I'll dress myself. Like, I would like to be able to dress myself. Also, because previously when I did have my back surgery, that was pretty horrendous. And I was laying flat on my back for like 5 days. And I swore that I would never go through that again. Like, I would not be using bedpans. I would not be having sponge baths. I would not be brushing my teeth into a cup. I was like, no, work with me here. Like, if we can do things and I can do things and be self-sufficient in some way, let me know and I'm going to try. And it was very much a two-way street. So yeah, if they said to me, yes, we can try and stand up now, I was like, okay, cool. Obviously if they had said to me 100% no, you're not allowed to move, I would have listened and I wouldn't have pushed it. But as it was, they said, yeah, we can try little things. And each little thing that I managed to do was another tick in the box, and it got me closer to being home. And I think that was a big thing. Everything that I knew that I was doing, just from even being able to take off my hospital gown, put on my own clothes, that was another tick to me getting closer to going home and seeing my family. And I was very grateful that the team that were around me worked with me on that. And I think they could see the drive that I had, and they could see the kind of determination that I had. Not because I was like, get me out of this hospital. It wasn't that at all. It was just more the determination that I had, that I wanted to go home and I wanted to say to my mum and dad, or let them see me and know that I was alive and I was okay and I was well, and they could actually have communication with me and not just communication from the hospital team to tell them that I was okay. Because I think any parent doesn't really believe that until they actually see their child in front of them and they're like, oh, okay, she's actually okay. Yeah.
And cool how maybe the experience with your back previously, because obviously you went through so much in such a short time, but that experience maybe even helped motivate you and be able to appreciate your independence and really fight for it when you were in the hospital again.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think I lost a lot of independence. So I did, and I think I did lose a lot of independence when I was in the hospital. It was a surgery that I wasn't prepared to have. It was emergency spinal, and also at the time, when I went into it, they did say that I would probably be able to go home maybe within like a day or two. And that actually got extended because my body wasn't responding to pain medication. And without me being out of pain, they weren't going to allow me out of the bed. And it got further and further, like day after day. And we weren't able to control the pain, and I wasn't allowed to move, and I wasn't allowed to go to the toilet by myself, and wasn't allowed to brush teeth by myself, and I wasn't able to like wash myself and all these kind of things. And I'm, a very independent, self-sufficient person. You might be able to tell. So having someone sponge bath me was just not
your idea of a good time.
No, not at all. And it kind of did scar me, I think. So when I then went into surgery, even though I was like, okay, this is brain surgery, like potentially it's even bigger than spinal, I don't really know. But before I went in, I didn't know how it was going to be, but I just knew that I even said to them, I was like, I am not using a bedpan. Like, okay. Fine. I'm just going to tell you now, we're not doing that. I was like, I've done that a couple months ago. I am not doing that again. And I kind of laid it on the line. I was like, please just work with me on this. I really want to be able to brush my teeth, and I really want to be able to not have to do that. And yeah, it was from that kind of, I think I had even more determination to be able to actually get out of there and to be self-sufficient by myself.
That's amazing. And you talked about getting back into training then after the brain surgery, but I know training was extremely important to you throughout all of your treatment so far. And, I imagine it looks very different from what your training had been in the past, but can you talk about why that was important to you and what impact that had on your entire treatment experience?
Yeah. So for me, like training as well was very much a mental health side of it. Like it's what I love. Yeah, like I love training. And the thought of kind of having months on end of not being able to do anything, I was like, I'm going to go insane. Like I like being active. Even if it is just going out for a walk and stuff like that. Like I like to be active. I like to be moving. And I knew that from a mental health perspective, it was really going to help me. Like, I don't think anyone can deny the fact that sort of what happened last year was quite stressful.
For everyone.
But obviously, and obviously exercise can help with that. It can, any form of exercise that you enjoy can really help with stress levels. So that was a huge part of it, was I wanted to be able to still move my body in ways that I knew were sensible and that would help for my mind. But also just kind of like I started to look into the effects of what exercise and movement can do from a treatment perspective as well, and help me getting through the treatments that I knew were coming up. And obviously I knew that chemotherapy probably wasn't going to be giggles. I knew it wasn't going to be fun, but I thought, well, if I can try and help myself in any way that I can, I'm going to try that. And the way that I know from being a personal trainer and from obviously years of training before, the way that I know how I can help myself is through training. So I spoke to my oncologist about it when I moved to the hospital that I'm in, and prior to chemotherapy. And I said to him that, like, I'll be real, I have had back surgery and I've just had brain surgery. I cannot train to the level that I used to train previously. I was still at a point that I wasn't able to lift like significant weight because of my back. I was still rehabbing that. I was still on crutches at this point as well.
Oh my goodness.
So I was still learning to walk and kind of move. But I had a stationary bike at home and I had resistance bands, and I was like, can I still do things through chemotherapy to help myself in that way? And he was amazing. And he said, look, do not stop exercising. It was like, the one thing that he says to his patients is do not stop exercising, mainly for the fact that if you do, the fatigue is going to take hold of you. And it really does. Like, the fatigue is one of the most debilitating parts of chemotherapy. But thankfully, in the 6 months that I had it, it didn't really touch me. I had it a couple times during my first phase of chemotherapy, but that was because the drugs that they were using in those first 8 weeks, they're cumulative and it gets worse each time, and they are nasty. So kind of like the third and fourth treatment, my last two, the fatigue didn't actually hit me. However, it would only hit me for 2-3 days post infusion, and then I would pretty much quickly bounce back. And it really shocked people around me, because it was like, are you even on this? Like, what are you even, like, are you just milking this? Like, what are you doing? Like, because I would just kind of, after about like 3-4 days, I would go out and like they would see me, and then I would be okay. And I was like, yeah, my body's just responding really well, but I'm still moving. So I cleared everything with him. I said, like, this is the equipment that I've got. This is what I'm planning on doing. He, bless him, was obviously like, you know more than me in terms of exercising. However, it sounds amazing. Okay. Yeah. And so then that's what I did. I very much quickly learned that I couldn't have a plan. I'm very much used to kind of thinking, okay, on this day, like, a training plan. I stick to that training plan. When I was going through treatment, that went out the window, because you don't know how you're going to feel each day. Muscular soreness, that is very heavy when you're going through treatment as well. I learned very quickly that my volume had to significantly decrease. My muscles would get very sore. And the last thing that you want when you're trying to obviously fight the effects of treatment as well is also fight the effects of DOMS. You do not want that. But even if it was just kind of in that day, I would do sort of like a 20-minute little pedal on the bike. And then I would do some resistance exercises. I would do some like press ups, but on my knees. I would progress them. I would just do a lot of body weighted training, like lunges and things as well. For me personally, I had to obviously do things that were permitted from my back physio too, in terms of that rehab perspective. But I really wanted to focus on that as well, because they did say to me that the worry would be going through chemo that potentially my back rehab would take a little bit of a sidestep, because chemo does have an effect on your muscles and your ligaments and your joints and that kind of thing. But I was also very determined that that wasn't going to happen. And by that point, I'd come off of the crutches and I was able to walk by myself. I was able to squat and lunge and all the things that kind of at one point when I first did my back, I wasn't sure if I would ever do again. I started to do them and I didn't want to lose that. So while I was going through chemo, I actually did progress quite well with that as well. So I was then starting to lift heavier weights again. I then got an assault bike in my flat, because it was the pandemic and obviously the gyms were shut and stuff. So I got an assault bike, and so I think kind of like I remember going into my oncologist room and saying, so I've got this assault bike. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but it sounds horrendous.
It sounds terrible.
Obviously explained to him what it was. Asked him if it was okay if I was to use this. And, I have used this previously. I've used it a lot. Which is obviously very much a key thing when you're going through treatment and you're trying to train through treatment. It's doing things that your body already knows from before. If you weren't a runner before, don't try and run a marathon. Sticking to things that your body is kind of used to. But even if you haven't trained before, just starting off very light and doing things. But the further I got through treatment and the more I realized actually I'm not fatiguing here, and the side effects that I'm getting from treatment are actually minimal. The nausea went away after I stopped the really nasty drugs. And then when I then went through my last phase of chemo, I didn't really feel anything. The only thing that I was really kind of getting was hair loss, I suppose, which is completely natural. But weirdly, my hair started to actually regrow towards the last phase of my chemo. And yeah, they kind of and it responded really well. Like my liver tumor completely disappeared solely through chemo. When they did my brain scan post chemo, they couldn't find anything anymore. So they only did the Cyberknife as an insurance policy, as I said, but that actually completely had gone. My breast tumor was significantly smaller than before I had started. So it showed that the drugs had worked incredibly well. But every time I went in there and I had my follow-up, and I saw my oncologist every 2 weeks, and I would go in and he would say to me, "How are you feeling? How are you doing?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Like, I'm all right. Like, it's all right. It's okay." And he was like, "Are you still exercising?" I was like, yeah, still doing it. As much as I can do. And they did kind of like laugh, I suppose.
Double take, like, what?
They had a bit of a laugh. And we're like, okay, sure. But I do put it down to the fact of yes, okay, like physically I was in a good way before I went in. But arguably I was also slightly broken because of my back. Like I wasn't training as much as I was doing. So I don't think it's, anyone listening to this that might think that, if you've got if they have treatment coming up or they're going through it or know anyone, doesn't mean that because they haven't exercised prior to treatment, that they can't start it. It just means that you'll be doing obviously significantly different stuff than potentially someone that was doing it before. But it shows that if you do continue to exercise through treatment, which is what I'm really trying to strive for, and that's why I've now retrained as a cancer exercise specialist, is to promote that and to help people go through treatment and see the benefit that exercise has when hand in hand with the medical treatment that they're having.
And it's incredible. It's like you said, it's not only mental health and being able to tolerate the side effects of chemo better, but now the more we're learning that exercise actually does improve your prognosis with treatment. So there's so many reasons to do it. And that's awesome that you've been able to really channel your experience into helping others with exercise through cancer treatment too. I also just wanted to touch on sort of, you've gone through this whole experience, and you just hearing your attitude, it's so strong, your resilience, and being able to continue with training, and now hearing that, the tumor in your brain and in your liver are gone. That has to be an incredible feeling when you hear that news. What is it? So I imagine also though, that it's not always every single day, you wake up with a perfectly positive attitude. So I imagine there are still times where it's difficult. And what is it during those times that helps you kind of pull out of it and pull back into, switch your thoughts or switch back into more of a positive attitude?
So I think the one thing that really helped me right from the very beginning, and it was actually something that my boyfriend first said to me when I was diagnosed, was let's just take one step at a time, like minimal steps. And the times that I get down and I feel the saddest are usually the times that I'm getting the most stressed because I'm trying to think of this bigger picture. And I find that those are the days when I wake up, especially if I've got scans coming up or treatment coming up, or sometimes I just wake up and I just think, well, what does my future actually look like? And that's completely normal and that's completely natural. And especially when you've got a metastatic cancer as well, you have no idea what the future holds, and that uncertainty I think is the most difficult part. As humans, we like to know, and we like to have certainty in our life, and to kind of be faced with complete uncertainty, which happens when you are diagnosed with an illness like this, because you have no idea what your scan results are going to be like. You've got no idea on a daily basis how you're going to feel from the drugs that you're on, or if you're in remission, you have no idea if it's going to come back, and if it does come back, how that's going to look. And that uncertainty is the most difficult part, and that's the part that affects my mental health the most. But in those times when I do start to feel like that, I then just keep trying to have this attitude that he instilled, like my boyfriend instilled in me, is just think of it in one step. And so we just think of it in really tiny steps. If there's ever moments where I feel like I'm getting really overwhelmed and I'm getting really anxious and scared about scans coming up or what that's going to look like, and we just think, well, we don't know what that scan's going to look like. So for example, tomorrow I've got my next scan. I don't know if it's going to be good, and I don't know if it's not. So instead of me kind of getting upset about what it could be. I just think, well, I don't know right now. So all I know is I'm going to walk into that hospital and I'm going to have a scan. And that's all I think about. So I literally just think, okay, at 10:30 a.m., I need to be at the hospital. I'm going to have a scan. And I just block out whatever's going to happen after. Yeah. And then from there, it's like, okay. And then after that, I'm going to go and see my oncologist. And then that's all I know. But then I try and not even think about that. I only know because I turn up on time, but I just don't think about the results. I don't think about what's going to happen from those results. We just really broke it down every step through my treatment. And still now, like when I was going through chemo, it was like, okay, well, Tuesday was always chemo day. So I always knew that on a Tuesday it was chemo day. So I just literally would break it down to, okay, so Monday, I'm going to pack for chemo. Tuesday, we'll have chemo. I don't know what's going to happen for the rest of the week, so I don't think about it. And then I just took every little step as we went through, and I've really promoted that as well to people that have reached out to me on social media and talked to me about their own treatment plan or their own diagnosis and are feeling very overwhelmed by it. I really push for this mindset of just take it literally one tiny step. And it really does help, and it has helped them. And, you know, to the minimalist, like literally just to, okay, when you're going into hospital, Monday, 9 a.m. All right, that's all you have to think about. Don't think about what's going to happen, because you just don't know. And that isn't actually, it's not helpful to try and think about, you know, try and predict, because you don't know. So in that mindset, it's like, well, what is going to help me at this moment in time? Is it going to help me by thinking further ahead? Is it, you know, by thinking about my future, by thinking about my results? No, it isn't. But what is helpful? Well, it's helpful if I turn up to my appointment on time, and that's all I need to know right now, is that it's at 9:30. Done. So that's the biggest thing that I've kind of adopted as I was going through, and I still follow now. It's just really, really baby steps. And in those times where I am getting overwhelmed, I just try and take a breath and calm down. And I just think, okay, what's the next step that I need to do? That's the next step. Okay, we're not going to think about anything else apart from that's what I need to do next. And I did, I do speak to a psychologist every couple of weeks. I started with a psychologist in February, I think, this year. Not really because I kind of felt like I needed to. It was just more suggested to me by my hospital team. They did say to me that, like, you have been through a lot in this last year. Do you think that it might be beneficial if you speak to someone? And at the time I was like, oh, I might as well give it a go. And I was very grateful that opportunity had been, you know, given to me. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll give it a go. And actually it's been incredible. And he also very much instills and says to me, you know, in those moments, think about what is helpful to you. You know, if you are getting upset and you are getting anxious and about certain things, just sit there and think, is it helpful if I sit here and think about this? You know, for example, is it helpful if I sit here and I get angry towards the woman that misdiagnosed me? No, it isn't. But then what is helpful to think about? And for me, it's like, okay, well, in that moment, what is helpful? At the time, in the last couple of months, it was studying, and it was getting me through the course so that now I can train people through their cancer treatment. So that was my focus, and that's what was helping me at that time. And it's just trying to kind of address the feelings that you feel and let yourself feel those feelings. Like he describes it as a beach ball. If you're trying to push a beach ball down, it's just going to keep popping up. And it's really true. Like, if you're trying to suppress the feelings that you feel, they are just going to keep popping up, and they're going to annoy you more and more because they're not going to go away. But it's like, okay, I know the beach ball was here. I'm just going to let it float around. That's fine. But I can also focus on other parts of my life. And that's what I've kind of adopted, and that's what I do now.
Yeah. And it's really, I think, really inspiring also how you have focused on other parts of your life and using, like you said, doing the training program now to train others through their cancer treatment. I know you've done a lot of work with battle cancer as well, coming out, you know, making the trip to come out to the games, even while you're on treatment, and just saying, hey, I'm not just going to stop my life and sit here at home and wait through treatment, but I'm going to keep living my life and doing everything that I can. And that's incredibly inspiring too. What has it been like for you, and what has helped you make some of those decisions?
I think because a lot of people say to me, oh, I bet you must wish that this had just, never happened. And I get that quite a lot. And so that I just kind of think, well, I can't wish that this didn't happen. This has happened. But I try and focus on what I actually have gained from this situation and not what I have lost from this situation, because what I've lost from this situation, potentially, I'm not going to get back the last 6 months of my life when I was in the hospital on a drip. Like, I'm not going to get that back.
Yeah.
But in that time, what I did gain from that, I gained a lot of independence and a lot of confidence that I didn't have before. I was getting treatment by myself because of the fact that it was a pandemic. So I've got very, very used to going into the hospital, just getting those treatments on my own. Like, that didn't bother me in the end. And my cat's now piping up. I hear him in the background.
Wants to make an appearance.
Having a feature. I thought it was too good to be true. He was quiet for so long. But yeah, and then I just kind of think, well, what can I gain from this? And I know that I've gained the personal experience of seeing the benefits that training has had on me. So for me, it then became very much a drive of, well, I want others to be able to see the benefit of this. And I think I've got a pretty powerful message in the sense of, I'm not someone that, you would expect potentially to have cancer. Obviously not that it sort of has like a look, which is also what I try and drive for. A lot of people say to me, you don't look like you have cancer. And I'm very much pushing for the message of cancer doesn't have a look. What you see on the media as well, and what you see in films and TV and stuff like that, unfortunately, it's very much driven trying to kind of be emotive. And you see that side of it, but actually that terrifies people, because then when they get diagnosed with that, or they know someone that gets diagnosed with that, all they can see is that image that they have. So while I was going through, I was like, well, how do I change this? I want to focus on what I can actually gain from this situation. And that has been speaking out on my social media. I'm very open and very blunt with the way that I speak about it. But I'm just taking the taboo away from cancer as a whole, not being uncomfortable about it, not being embarrassed about it, and also trying to take the fear away from it. And as I started to be more and more open, and then I started to get messages from people saying that they had found my profile through searching, hashtag breast cancer, whatever it might have been, and they found it. When I particularly got messages from women saying that they'd just been diagnosed with breast cancer and they saw my profile and now they're not scared to go into treatment, that to me was incredible. And that continued to drive my force of being open, showing my journey and showing my treatment, from everything that's happened. I've shown every inch of it, from the good to the bad to, what people might deem as embarrassing. I've, showcased it all, to take that taboo away, and to make people more comfortable to hear the word cancer and to not fear the word cancer. But also then from a training perspective as well, and that's why I very much got involved with Battle Cancer and help promote them as well, is that the whole training through treatment, post-treatment, that is still quite a fearful subject. People don't know how to exercise during treatment. A lot of people didn't realize that they still could exercise during treatment. I get that a lot. I get a lot of people messaging me saying, I didn't actually know that I want to exercise, but I didn't know if I should. I didn't know if I could. And the more I was getting these things, I was like, there has to be something that I can try and do to change this. And that's what that's what I'm focusing in. And I think it's helped me. It definitely has helped me mentally get through my own treatment by kind of plowing myself into other things as well. But from that, I've tried to turn what could be a horrendous situation into something slightly more positive, and see what I can actually gain from it, which at the moment has been so many people that I've connected with on social media, at the games, like after the panel talk we did, the amount of people that came up to me in the days afterwards asking to chat with me and saying that they were, inspired by it and things like that. It's amazing. It's amazing the effect that being open about your story can have. And yeah, so it's just, I sort of more go through the mindset of, okay, cancer's really rubbish sometimes, but I've gained so much in the last year. I'm a completely different person to who I was previously. I'm way more confident. I'm way more appreciative of things in life. Strangely, I'm actually a lot calmer, I suppose, than I used to be. Cancer's actually calmed me. I'm not as kind of like, I don't get stressed very easily, which actually kind of sounds a bit strange. The fact of, if you think about everything that's happened in the last year, you might think that actually I would be a complete stress monkey. I'm not. I'm the complete opposite. It's actually really de-stressed me in the way that I see life and I see that in day to day. And so I actually think I've gained a lot of positives from cancer, and that's what I'm very much pushing for, is to kind of show that, it's not great. Like it, and there were days where I do have really down days, and that's completely normal, but I'm still pushing for, this is what I've actually gained from it. I've gained a whole new career focus, a whole new appreciation, confidence. I'm doing amazing things. I'm experiencing amazing things like CrossFit Games and going out there and sharing my story and, trying to tie that bridge that we were discussing about exercise and training and the medical world as well, and like, bridging that gap between the pair. So I've just, that's kind of like what I've, I suppose, gained. I said I've gained multiple times.
But, well, you have gained a lot. You have gained a lot, and it's incredible. Like you said, you've been through so much, and on top of that, a pandemic, on top of that, having gone through your back surgery right before, and you could have gone through this situation two very different ways. And you've really, I think, made it the most positive it could possibly be. And I think just hearing your story and seeing the way that you talk about it, there's a few things that really stick out to me. The first that we talked about is really just being an advocate for yourself along every step of the path and knowing what is going to be best for you and advocating for that and talking to people about it and not just accepting things at face value. And then knowing that, like you said, cancer doesn't have a look, that it can happen to anybody, even if you're young, even if you're healthy, and whether it's just getting your regular screening test or noticing changes in your body and then really, really pushing and advocating for checking those out. I hope that people will do that too. And then, like you said, your mental attitude in general, all of the little lessons I think I've learned from you here about just taking those baby steps, focusing on just the next step in front of you, trying to reframe things, trying to focus on what you can learn from them. And also just being open and vulnerable. I think sharing your story, whether it's people feeling comfortable sharing their story on social media, like you, and connecting with others, or whether it's just being vulnerable with your friends and family and being able to share what you're going through and having that support, or your gym community, whoever it is, that's your community. There's so much that I think we all gain by being real with each other and realizing that we are all going through hard things. Obviously, not all of us are going through the same hard things. You've had quite the hand that you've been dealt, but just sharing that, I think there's so much power in what brings us all closer together. And then the training, knowing that exercise and training, whatever form that looks like, can change through different phases of life and is important for our mental health, but also our physical health, and can be a real adjunct to cancer treatment. So thank you for being such an advocate and really being so open and sharing everything, because, I know you see it, like you said, the people that reach out on social media or that you talk to at the games or whatever, but you are touching so many people, and it's incredible just to see that happen and see the light that comes out of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to close with 3 questions I ask everyone at the end of the podcast. So the first one is, what are the 3 things that you do now on a regular basis that have the biggest positive impact on your health?
So I would say number one actually is sleep. I am very much an advocate for sleep now. I used to be horrendous with sleep. I used to go to bed late. I would get up early. As a PT, I'd always be up at, 5 a.m. That was my alarm clock. But I would be awful at going to bed on time, and just kind of I suppose in an awful way, I just got used to being tired. But then in the last year, seeing the benefit actually that sleep has, and I always heard about it, everyone always says, sleep more. And I was like, yeah, sure.
I'll do that later.
But it wasn't, but then it wasn't until I went through treatment, and the only way that I would recover is if I slept. And if I had a day where I didn't sleep, I would really feel it. And I was like, okay, what these people have been saying for the last years, I've kind of disregarded. And I'm like, yeah, sleep's great. Actually, it really is. So now I make sure that, I am a bit of a grandma, and I don't care. Like I go to bed at like 9:30, and and that's my bedtime. But I feel great for it. I have, energy from it, and it's helped me recover through my treatment, and it's helped me recover through my training. So yeah, number one, every day, make sure that I get my sleep. I think the second one would be activity of some level. So, not every day I don't train like people would kind of like view training. But I move my body in some way, shape, or form. Whether that be, going out for a walk or doing some mobility or like something of that sort. More, it kind of like, I suppose, came from my back injury. Sitting down was significantly detrimental to my back. If I sat down for more than half an hour, it would seize. So I just got used to kind of like, even if it was just getting up and walking around my kitchen. But then now I don't need to do that, but I still just make sure that I am relatively active with my body, also from a mindset point of view as well. Like I just, if I need to take 5 minutes out, then I'll just go outside, and I'll just, if it's not raining, which always is in London, but just some sort of like activity in space of some degree. And then the third one, I think, for my health, I hated mindfulness and meditation and all of that stuff before this year. I really couldn't get on board with it. I really wasn't a fan of it. I just didn't really see the point of it, and I felt really uncomfortable doing it. But I've got into it, but potentially not in the kind of the classical way. I'm still not quite there with kind of like listening to the meditative apps and things like that. Like I still sort of feel a bit strange, but I always take time out of my day where it's just me, just to, even if it's just to like sit and be still and to be quiet and to just be in with my thoughts. And I used to think that sounded really like cliche and a bit strange, but now I really understand why people do it. Especially, we were saying about kind of allowing yourself to feel feelings, and in that moment of time, like I don't push those feelings away. And I think that's been really important to my mental health, is in those times, if I am feeling those feelings, I let myself feel them, and then I just kind of readdress why I'm feeling them. And then I then just think about, okay, well, how can I help that? Or even if I don't think about that, I just sit and I just have some time, even if it's like 10-15 minutes of your day, where you can just sit and be still and not be doing something, not watching the TV, not focused on anything. But however you see mindfulness or you see meditation, doing that for like some part of your day and just allowing yourself to breathe, that has been a huge part of like my daily routine now as well.
I love that. And I can relate to, it doesn't always have to be, an app or a formal practice, but finding what works for you and having that space is so important. What's one thing that you think would have an impact on your health, but you have a hard time implementing it, or something that you're working on?
That is a good question. I would probably say the one thing that I do, that I should probably be better at actually. Not so much nutrition is good, but in terms of like, so when I had my brain surgery, it actually switched off my hunger cue. So I could literally go through the day and not be hungry. The only way that I actually know that I am hungry is I get really hangry. Like I get really like grumpy and I'm like,
straight to
my blood sugars. Yeah. But I was so used to having like eating out of a Tupperware box and rushing my meal between clients and things like that. Whereas actually the last year I've really tried to take a step back and not rush my food and not rush my time eating and actually, spend the time making the right choices with your food. And actually just like sitting and eating it. Like that was kind of something that I'm still trying to get better at. I'm still, because I am very busy, like with hospital appointments and things like that. I do sort of like try and like eat on the go. And then you don't really realize actually some days like you've barely really like eating much because you're just kind of like on the go. Even that's sort of reinforced by the fact that, my signals are all funky. So I'm getting better at it. I'm getting better at kind of like actually being like, no, I'm actually going to sit here for half an hour and I'm going to have a meal and I'm actually going to enjoy my meal and I'm going to eat and I'm not going to be eating while I'm walking or, and I think that's something that everyone tends to do at some point, whether you even got like an office job or if you do have an active job or whatever it might be, you always see it. People are always constantly eating on the go. And from a kind of like a health perspective in terms of like your digestion and actually ensuring that you've got enough calories in your day as well. Just making sure that actually you set yourself time. Because we have to eat. We're humans. Like you have to eat. You have to take that time.
And it's another form of mindfulness too. But like you talked about earlier, it's another form of mindfulness, just being in the moment and focusing on what's in front of you.
And eating without a screen as well. Because everyone does that. They're like, I'll eat on my lunch break, but then have the screen on the side and you're still answering emails while you're still doing it. It's like, no, just shut everything away and just, focus on like your meal at the time.
That's a great one. My last question is, what does a healthy life look like to you?
I think a healthy life to me just looks like it sounds kind of cliche, but what makes you happy. Like you can't, like I will never sit there and say to someone, a healthy lifestyle looks like you going for a run twice a week and doing this and doing that and doing that. If that makes you miserable, that's not a healthy life. To me, a healthy life is what makes you happy, but what makes you feel good at that time. And I think, people that kind of maybe are stuck in a rut of thinking, well, sitting on the sofa and watching TV makes me happy. It's like, yeah, but does that make you feel good? And then when they then say, well, I've got back pain and I'm tired and, I'm like, if their diet's not very, good, say, for example, and their blood sugars are up and down all the time and they don't understand why they're not sleeping well at night and things like that. It's like, well, you might think these things are making you happy, but are they making you feel good? And I think it's making sure that you've got the balance of both. And I very much focused on that. Like now I don't do things that I think are going to make me healthy if they don't make me happy at the same time. So for me, there's certain like exercises that I absolutely hate. So I just don't do them anymore because I'm like, well, I really hate them. And I can do other things that I really like, which will actually have the same effect. And I think I'm not ashamed to say no to things. I was always very much a yes man. And I think now I'm kind of not more of a no man, but like if someone says, oh, do you want to do this? Oh, like say, for example, a social event, or do you want to go out to like a bar or something like that? Before I would have been like, okay, yeah, sure. And then I would have gone along and I wouldn't have actually been very happy doing it. I might have thought, oh, this is kind of health in the way of like, this is a healthy social life. Like you should be social. But is it making me happy? No, it's not, because actually I'd quite like to be sat at home with a peppermint tea right now. But like, so then now I just do that. But then it kind of, by doing that, you actually see that I still see my friends a lot and I still have, a lot of social occasions, and I still chat with my friends, and I'm very much like not a lonely person. But I like my alone time. I like being me. And I just take more time out to myself to do the things that I want to do, whether that be saying no to stuff. Yeah. I think the best way that we can be is kind of don't always view health as being, what you eat and what you do in terms of in the gym. It's actually, there's so many other elements of it, and it's kind of addressing it of what actually is going to make you happy. So if, health is mental, health is physical, but finding the balance of doing everything in that actually you enjoy. So doing the exercise you enjoy, eating the foods that you enjoy, but obviously try and eat the vegetables you enjoy and kind of have that balanced diet as well. But, if you want to eat have a pot of ice cream, eat a pot of ice cream, like those kind of things. Like if it's going to make you happy in that moment, then have that balance. But also from like a mental health and like social point of view, saying yes to the things that are going to make you feel good and feel happy and you're going to enjoy, but don't feel pressured to do the things that that you're actually not going to enjoy.
Yes, I love that. It's beautiful to see you living that out and really, really knowing what it is that you want and what is going to make you healthy and happy, and really, again, advocating for that. So thank you so much, Fran. This has been amazing. You are just such a bright light in the world, and I know all of us are rooting for you and supporting you, and just glad to see and hear your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you or someone you know has a story to share on a future episode of Pursuing Health, please write me at info@pursuing-health.com. If you enjoy listening to the podcast, please also consider subscribing and giving it a 5-star rating on iTunes. It really does help to get the word out to more people.